In 1998, a man published a book so dangerous, it was banned in every prison in the United States. Not because it contained violence, not because it was obscene, because the guards noticed something terrifying. The inmates who read it started winning. In arguments, in negotiations, in power dynamics. They were using the book's strategies on the guards themselves. The book was The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Since then, it has sold over 5 million copies. It sits on the desks of rappers, CEOs, convicted criminals, and heads of state. Jay-Z quotes it. Kanye quotes it. So does the Pentagon. A book loved equally by billionaires and prisoners. That should tell you something about what's inside. Today, I'm going to show you the 7 most dangerous laws in this book. The ones they will never teach you in school. The ones that explain how power actually works, when nobody's pretending to be moral. Setup: Robert Greene and the story of the book's creation. But before we open this book, you need to know the story of how it was written, because it changes everything. Robert Greene was not a professor, not a psychologist, not a politician. He was a struggling writer, working 50 different jobs: construction, translation, Hollywood assistant. By his mid-30s, he had nothing to show for his life. But during all those jobs, Greene noticed something. The people who succeeded weren't the hardest workers or the most talented. They were the ones who understood the unwritten rules. The assistant who got promoted wasn't the most competent. She was the one who made her boss look good while quietly positioning herself. The contractor who won every bid wasn't the cheapest. He was the one who took his clients to dinner and made them feel important. Greene started collecting these patterns obsessively. He read 200 biographies. He studied 3,000 years of history, from ancient China to modern Wall Street, and he distilled it all into 48 laws. The result? A book that reads like a how-to guide for Machiavelli, if Machiavelli had access to 25 more centuries of data. Let's begin with the most dangerous one. Law number 1. The law that has destroyed more careers, more friendships, and more promising futures than any other. 1. Never outshine the master. Law 1. Never outshine the master. This is the first law in the book for a reason. Because it's the one people break most often, usually without realizing it. Here's the law in Greene's own words. Make your masters appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain the heights of power. Simple, right? Don't upstage your boss. Everyone knows this. Except, almost no one does it. Because talented people can't help themselves. They want to show their brilliance. They want recognition. They think their talent will be rewarded. It won't. Let me tell you what happened to Nicolas Fouquet. In 1661, Nicolas Fouquet was the most powerful finance minister in France. He served King Louis XIV, the Sun King. Fouquet was brilliant, and he wanted everyone to know it. So he threw the most extravagant party France had ever seen. At his personal chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, he hosted the king himself. Fireworks, exotic food, a personal ballet performance by Molière. It was the most impressive display of wealth in European history. And it was the last party Fouquet ever threw. Louis XIV watched the spectacle and thought one thing: this man is more powerful than me. 3 weeks later, Fouquet was arrested, charged with embezzlement, sentenced to life imprisonment. He died in prison 19 years later. His crime? Not the embezzlement. That was a pretext. His crime was making the king feel small. The chateau? Louis XIV seized it. And then he built an even more extravagant palace, Versailles, to make sure no one would ever outshine him again. That's Law 1. It doesn't matter how talented you are. If your talent makes your superior feel threatened, your talent becomes your biggest liability. The modern version? The employee who presents a brilliant idea in a meeting, but frames it as the boss's idea, gets promoted. The one who takes credit publicly gets fired. The law isn't about being weak. It's about being strategic. Shine, but shine in a way that reflects light upward, not into your master's eyes. That was Law 1, the gentle one. The next law is where Robert Greene shows you the wolf underneath the sheep. 2. Conceal your intentions. Law 3. Conceal your intentions. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. Most people are terrible at this. They announce their goals, they tell everyone their plans, they ask for advice publicly, and then they wonder why someone else got there first. Greene's model for this law? The Marquise de Pompadour, the most powerful woman in 18th century France. Pompadour wanted to become the official mistress of King Louis XV, but she was a commoner. In 18th century France, a commoner approaching the king was social suicide. So she never approached the king directly. Instead, she made herself visible, attending events she knew he would attend. She dressed just slightly differently from the other women, enough to catch his eye, not enough to seem desperate. She studied his interests. He loved theater, so she became the best amateur actress in Paris. He loved hunting, so she arranged to cross his path in the forest. Accidentally, every encounter seemed like fate. None of it was. By the time Louis invited her to court, he believed it was entirely his own idea. She concealed every intention so perfectly that the king felt like the pursuer, when he was actually the pursued. She controlled France for 20 years, from a position that technically had no power at all. The modern translation? The entrepreneur who announces, "I'm building the next Facebook" on social media, gets copied immediately. The one who builds quietly, launches suddenly, and captures the market before anyone reacts, wins. Elon Musk publicly launches rockets and tweets memes. But the real decisions at Tesla, the battery technology, the manufacturing process, the supplier negotiations, happen in silence. The spectacle is the decoy. The substance is hidden. Conceal your intentions. Let people see what you want them to see, and nothing more. 2 laws, and already the world looks different, doesn't it? But the next one is the law that separates people who talk about power from people who have it. 3. Always say less than necessary. Law 4. Always say less than necessary. When you are trying to impress people with words, the more you say, the more common you appear. This is the law that feels the most counterintuitive. We live in a world that rewards communication, TED Talks, podcasts, social media. Everyone is talking. But Greene argues, the powerful are the ones who listen. His example? Louis XIV. Again. The Sun King was famous for a single word, "Je verrai." I'll see. That's all he would say, to ambassadors, to generals, to his own family. I'll see. No explanation, no justification, no elaboration. And it drove everyone insane, because they couldn't predict what he would do. They couldn't prepare. They couldn't plan around him. His silence made him unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. Contrast this with modern politicians who give 45-minute press conferences and say absolutely nothing of substance. They talk too much, and every word becomes a weapon their opponents can use against them. The person who speaks least in a negotiation usually gets the best deal, because silence creates pressure. The other side fills the void with concessions. Try it. Next time you're negotiating, a salary, a contract, anything, state your position. Then stop talking. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't fill the silence. Watch what happens. 3 laws in, and you're already seeing patterns in your own life. That colleague, that friend, that boss. They've been using these laws on you, and you didn't even notice. But the next law? This one is personal, because it's about you. 4. Use selective honesty to disarm law. 12. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. One sincere and honest move will cover over dozens of dishonest ones. This is the most Machiavellian law in the entire book, and the most uncomfortable to hear, because you've fallen for it many times. Here's how it works. When someone does something unexpectedly kind for you, buys you a gift, admits a weakness, tells you a secret, your defenses drop completely. You think, this person is genuine. I can trust them. And that's exactly the moment you're most vulnerable. Greene's example is devastating. In the 1920s, a con artist named Victor Lustig performed one of the greatest scams in history. He sold the Eiffel Tower twice. How? Not through elaborate deception, through honesty. Lustig invited 5 scrap metal dealers to a private meeting at a luxury hotel. He told them he was a government official and that the Eiffel Tower was being demolished and sold for scrap. Ridiculous, right? No one would believe that. But then Lustig did something brilliant. In a private moment with one of the dealers, the one he'd identified as the most gullible, he confessed that he was underpaid as a government official. He subtly implied he was open to a bribe. This moment of honesty, of vulnerability, of admitted corruption made the dealer trust him completely. Because who would admit to being corrupt unless they were genuinely corrupt? The dealer paid for the Eiffel Tower and the bribe. And by the time he realized the truth, Lustig was in another country. The modern version is everywhere. The salesman who says, honestly, this product has one flaw. And then you trust everything else he says. The politician who admits one small mistake, and suddenly you believe all their big promises. The dating partner who reveals one vulnerability early, and you think you're seeing their real self. One moment of honesty covers 1,000 lies. That's Law 12. And it works because we desperately want to trust people. We're biologically programmed for it. Robert Greene doesn't tell you this to make you paranoid. He tells you so you recognize it when it's being used on you. 4 laws. Your worldview has shifted. I can feel it. But we're not done, because the next law is the most banned one in the entire book, the law that prison guards were terrified of. 5. Crush your enemy totally. Law. 15. Crush your enemy totally. All great leaders since Moses have known that a feared enemy must be crushed completely. This is the law that got the book banned in prisons, because it advocates total destruction, not negotiation, not compromise, not forgiveness. And Greene means it literally. His historical example: the rivalry between Empress Wu and her enemies in 7th century China. Empress Wu was the only woman to ever rule China as emperor in her own right. To get there, she had to eliminate every rival, not just defeat them, but erase them. She didn't just depose her enemies. She executed their families. She destroyed their records. She erased their names from history books. Brutal? Absolutely. But 1,400 years later, we still know her name. Her enemies? Nobody remembers them, because she crushed them totally. Greene's point is not that you should be cruel. His point is that half measures are more dangerous than total action. When you defeat an enemy but leave them alive and bitter, they come back. Always. With more motivation, more cunning, and a personal vendetta. Napoleon defeated his enemies across Europe, but left the Austrian and Prussian empires intact. They regrouped, they came back, and they destroyed him at Waterloo. The modern translation? The company that almost kills its competitor, but doesn't finish the job, creates its own nemesis. Remember when Netflix nearly destroyed Blockbuster? Blockbuster tried to fight back with its own streaming service. If Netflix had been slower, even by a year, the outcome might have been different. In your personal life, the toxic relationship you almost ended, but didn't. The bad habit you mostly quit, but kept a door open. Half measures create zombies, problems that won't die. If you're going to act, act completely. If you're going to change, change completely. If you're going to walk away, don't look back. 5 laws, each one darker than the last. But the next 2 are the laws that Robert Greene says changed his life, and they'll change yours. 6. Always say yes to power. The surrender tactic. Law 22. Use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power. When you are weaker, never fight for honor's sake. Surrender instead. It gives you time to recover. This is the most counterintuitive law in the entire book, and my personal favorite. Every instinct tells you to fight. When someone insults you, fight back. When you're losing, push harder. When your pride is wounded, defend it. Greene says, no. When you're weaker, surrender. Give them what they want. Bow your head. Agree with them. And then, wait. Because surrender is not defeat. Surrender is strategy. It's the oldest trick in warfare. Let the enemy think they've won, while you quietly rebuild your strength. Bertolt Brecht, the German playwright, used this law to survive both the Nazis and the McCarthyists. When the Nazis rose to power, he didn't fight. He left Germany quietly. When McCarthy's committee interrogated him in America, he didn't argue. He answered their questions politely, told them what they wanted to hear, and booked a flight to Europe the next morning. He never fought, and he never lost, because fighting would have gotten him killed or imprisoned. Surrendering kept him alive, and free to create his greatest work. The modern lesson? When your boss is wrong and you know it, don't fight in public. Agree. Then quietly position yourself for the next opportunity. The person who fights their boss in a meeting wins the argument and loses their career. 7. Think as you like, behave like others. Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. If you make a show of going against the times, flaunting your unconventional ideas, people will think you only want attention and will punish you. This is the quietest law, and the wisest. We live in an age that celebrates individuality. Be yourself. Think different. Stand out. Greene says, not so fast. Think whatever you want. Believe whatever you want. But in public, in the social game, blend in. Match the expectations of your environment. Don't provoke unnecessary attention. Why? Because people who publicly flaunt their differences attract enemies. Not because their ideas are wrong, but because their display makes others feel inferior. Galileo was not punished for believing the earth revolved around the sun. He was punished for saying it publicly, in a way that humiliated the Pope and the Church. If he had shared his findings quietly, through private letters to sympathetic scholars, he might have changed the world without spending his final years under house arrest. The irony? His ideas won eventually, but he suffered unnecessarily. Because he couldn't resist the public stage, think freely, but present wisely. Your most radical ideas should travel quietly, through actions and results, not through proclamations. 7 laws. 7 windows into a world that operates beneath the surface of polite society. Robert Greene didn't write the 48 laws of power to make you cruel. He wrote it to make you aware. Because these laws are being used on you. Every day. By your colleagues, your competitors, your leaders, and even the people who claim to love you. The question isn't whether these laws exist. They do. The question is whether you'll understand them, or be destroyed by them. Today I showed you 7. There are 41 more, each one as dark, as practical, and as uncomfortable as the ones you just heard. On Saturday, the complete dark audiobook summary drops. All 48 laws, 1 hour, no filter. If you want the full arsenal, that video is waiting for you. Subscribe. Because every week on this channel, we open books that change how you see the world. And next Wednesday, we open the book that Robert Greene himself considers the most dangerous one he's ever written. You're not ready, but you will be.